As Chair Nelson noted, we're about half hour behind schedule, so, but we do have 7 questions here that we're going to answer that we think will be helpful for shareholders. We also encourage you to look online, because several questions that were not answered directly at the community meeting are now posted on the My Sealaska page. So, that being said, that was a meeting that was held on May 20th, so hopefully you can find it on there. Question number 1. What protocol does the board follow in the selection of candidates that they support for the slate? Also, why send out so much mail-outs on their behalf? They should have to pay for their own campaign costs, just as the independents have. I understand the question, and it's a good one. One thing I will say is that in the past, we didn't have really a process for board evaluation. And so now what we have each year is we have basically a peer evaluation followed by a secret ballot instead of what was normally really a rubber stamp. If you wanted to rerun, you just put your name in and there was no questions asked, you were automatically going to be on the slate. And so now what we do is we have the secret ballot, and if you don't get at least 7 votes, then you are not going to be allowed to be on the slate that year. You can still run as an independent, however. And then we follow that with, through the governance committee, a solicitation for anybody, any shareholder who wants to run can put their name in for the process that we have for selecting whoever will be serving on the slate, who will be running on the slate with the other incumbents. And so in this case, this year, we had Angela Michaud and Lisa Lang and Michael Roberts join Morgan Howard on our board endorsed slate this year. So once we have the solicitation, the group that is comprised of about 5 people or 6 people on the governance board or the governance committee goes through and evaluates every one of the candidates based on I think there's about 16 criteria that are very important in what we consider would be an effective board member. It's a very rigorous process. And so then we do a blind ranking where the governance committee actually ranks each individual, and it's done through a Survey Monkey process where none of us know how we ranked any other individual. We only know how we ranked the individuals ourselves. And that way we don't have any groupthink, we don't have any, someone pushing for a candidate that they like. So we try really hard to make it very independent and we also include extra points for people that we think have skills that we lack on the board. So it's a very rigorous process. I think anyone who has been through it would agree with that. And then once we narrow the list down to the top 3 or 4, they are interviewed by the full board, and then the full board selects whomever they feel is best suited to serve on the board on the slate that year. And I just want to reiterate that the board has the fiduciary obligation to ensure that there are well-qualified shareholders to serve on the board. We need to remain a going concern. We need to make sure that we have people who have good business background and many other kinds of skills that are very desirable for a team. And then to answer why we spend money on campaign costs for the independents, it's because of the fact that they have endured and proven their value to the Sealaska board and that they were selected. I know that that's not going to be a happy answer that everybody wants to hear, but I want to reiterate that any shareholder can put their name in to go through that process. And so in that respect, it is fair. And Jaylene wants to add something.
I just want to add in terms of the expenses that this was an unusual year because of COVID, because of the lack of community meetings, that we weren't able to get our candidates, the endorsed candidates that were supported by the board, out in front of our communities, our shareholders. So that's why there was sort of a bigger influx than usual of mailings to our shareholders. We apologize for that, but it was the best that we could do to make sure that you learned about these very qualified candidates. As Jody said, they went through a rigorous process, and we wanted to make sure our shareholders learned about them. We also did ensure that we had videos available during the community meeting and also on My Sealaska for all shareholders to see all of the candidates. So we did have a different type of year this year, so we do apologize for the many mailings, but we did want to make sure you learned about the candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaylene. That was a good point, for sure. Okay, question number 2. What is the non-disclosure agreement that you have newly elected board members sign? And what conversations may they have once signed with the shareholders who have elected them without breaking this NDA or non-disclosure agreement? First of all, that's a really good question. I'm glad whoever asked it. We do not have a non-disclosure agreement. What we have is a code of ethics. And like any board, there are several things that are, several rules that are in place for any board, and one of them especially is to keep confidential information confidential. And you can understand why that is very important. When we have an executive session, if we are not able to talk freely, we won't be able to have the hard conversations that are very necessary for us to get past. And so people should be able to feel free to say what they want to say or what they feel is in the best interest of the company. But the code of ethics itself is really just to ensure that each of our board members acts in the best interest of the entire company and not just for themselves. So it's very important, as I'm sure you can imagine. We can't have someone going out there and speaking on behalf of the corporation when they really have no right to, because the corporation, the board of directors is a body that works as one. And so that's why it's necessary to have a code of ethics, but it's not a non-disclosure agreement.
Sorry, I just want to add one more thing as well. We do have the code of ethics, but all board members for any organization are subject to fiduciary responsibilities. And this is a state law, and just general business requirement is that you abide by these fiduciary responsibilities, which include a duty of loyalty and a duty of care. So those just cover your service regardless of any code of ethics or any other requirements at the corporation that you serve at. So I just wanted to point that out in addition to the code of ethics.
Thank you, Jaylene. Okay, question number 3. Sealaska typically holds a first tree ceremony to mark the beginning of the timber harvest season. Did this ceremony happen in 2020? And no, I don't believe it did. The board composition has changed dramatically since this controversial ceremony was instituted. Will it be held in 2020 or 2021? And I agree, yes, there are a lot of new board members, and all I can say is that we will be discussing this at a future board meeting. Go ahead.
And I believe I'm on the mic. I mean, to call it controversial is, I don't know where that comes from. It makes me proud that we're able to honor the first tree and respect that while we are in the timber harvesting business, we do it in a manner that fits our cultural values. We do it under environmental stewardship, and that we can never forget what that tree has given us, whether it's money for scholarships, whether it's a job, whether it's income that increases our dividends. We reflect that in the first tree ceremony. We thank the trees for what they give us. And I think that is wholly tied into who we are as a corporation, as a people, and our values. And any controversy may come from just not understanding exactly why we hold that particular ceremony. And it gives us a chance to be on our land and reflect our honor and respect of our forests. Thank you.
Yeah, and one more thing on that. Yes, it's true that we do harvest timber. However, I was very proud to see when I came on the board that we also practice silviculture, which is replanting of the trees that we have harvested, and then thinning, pre-commercial thinning also occurs to make sure that the trees have the best chance of surviving and growing tall, and at some point, maybe in the future, we'll be able to harvest again. And we've also found that trees, as they are growing, actually take more carbon out of the air than they do when they're mature. So these are all things that make me proud of the way we do our harvest. Okay, the next question is, Sealaska is expanding their presence in the seafood industry. Will you be using that as leverage to help shareholders who commercially fish by offering new markets for their fish or loans for boats or otherwise supporting local fishermen? And I'm going to give that one to Anthony.
I think long term, all of that comes into play. The seafood platform is new to us. We want to get it right. We bought 3 companies in fairly quick order. We're focused on value add, high quality seafood that increases the, let's call it, preciousness of wild Alaskan seafood. And we want what we're doing on the high quality value add side to flow back to our fishermen, the ones that are making the catches in Alaska, and the ones that are doing the heavy lift to get such a great product to so many. We work with a lot of partners. We've had conversations around that. We know we can do more in terms of loans. Spruce Root offers commercial loans. They have given a number of loans to shareholders. So we do offer loans to commercial fishermen, and Spruce Root would be the entity that you would have conversations with. And we look for more ideas and conversations as we grow our platform, get more comfortable that we are building something long-term and sustainable and stable, that we can bring any success we have on the seafood side back to local communities. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for your help with that one, Anthony. I knew that you would know more than I do, although I do know the goals. Okay, the next one, number 5. Sealaska supported the Alaska exemption for the roadless rule. Numerous Southeast Alaska tribes opposed the exemption or wanted a more nuanced approach where tribes could have input on logging near their communities. Your rebranding effort acknowledges Sealaska is perceived as a timber corporation. How will you support tribes who are concerned about the impact of clear-cutting near communities? Will you carry their message to DC and use your access to the Alaska congressional delegation? And many of you know, if you know me, know that I work for Inside Passage Electric Cooperative as its CEO. And I was, of course, I understand some of the reasoning why people didn't support didn't want the removal of the roadless rule. However, it has been a serious obstacle to energy development in Southeast Alaska. If you can't access a hydro source, for instance, then it's very difficult to bring lower cost power to a community. So, but I will let Jaylene answer more of that question.
Thank you for the question. And I know it was a big concern for many communities and shareholders that Sealaska did support the full exemption or a modified rule to allow more access and more opportunities for economic development training, and other opportunities in Southeast Alaska. I will say we did support an exemption in that modified rule because of our in-depth understanding of all the protections that are in place in Southeast Alaska beyond the roadless rule. There are significant layers of protection throughout our region, and the roadless is just one of them. So removing that one layer of protection doesn't remove all the other layers of protection that are already in place. The exemption would have resulted in only an additional 168,000 acres of land available and added to the timber base on the Forest Service lands. So it was a very minimal addition of lands to the timber base, and also would have provided more economic opportunities in the region, because as you're aware, most of our region is owned by the federal government, and economic opportunities are then more difficult and hindered. I will say also that despite our support for an exemption or a modified rule, we did have dialogue with the tribes. We did hear their concerns, and our final comments on the roadless rule to the Forest Service was that they ensure that by not having a blanket rule and using a more localized process for their timber activities, that localized process is meaningful, that they do ensure that they're talking to the local communities, they're talking to the local tribes, that they're making their decisions based on that local input. And so we did push for that, and that was supposed to be the goal of the Forest Service, and we just wanted to reaffirm that and make sure that they do follow that process to use local input and local concerns as they make their local decisions about timber activities. The rule is not yet final. They are in the process now of analyzing all of the comments that were submitted during the comment period, and the final rule should be submitted probably within the next month or so. And we will watch for that. And once it's finalized, if there is a full exemption, we will continue to do our part with the Forest Service and work with the tribes to ensure that local input is prioritized.
Yeah, I'd just really like to highlight the fact that working together is not always easy. It's not always supposed to be free of conflict. The tribes, because of the relationships that we are forming, we're free to come to us and say, I don't like your position, and this is why. And they heard us when we say, well, this is our position. Long term, we think economic development can be provided and the community can still have their say. At the end of the day, I think we changed. Sealaska had a long-term position, and we changed that, and we have taken that message that local control and the voice of our communities is the number one thing that the Forest Service should be listening to. And we've taken that back to DC, as you mentioned. It's important to keep on going. And through these sorts of issues, our relationships grows. I thank every tribe that came to us and disagreed with us and helped us make a change for the better, and we will continue to do so. In fact, we at that moment in time promised all the local tribes that we would send them our position letters in advance. So it was a very positive change long term, and I think it's just an example of where we may have disagreed, but we have far more agreements than we do disagreements. And working together means you can get past disagreements and move on to working together. So Gunak Chish to all our local tribes.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, we have 2 more questions, and we're going to wrap up this section. Okay, number 6. Hello, my only question, why have you failed your people/shareholders in providing further financial aid? There are some of us who have been denied unemployment and have never received a stimulus package. While I am thankful for the early April dividend, it's just not enough during these times. You know, I really don't know how to answer that question except to say that everything that Sealaska does is for the betterment of our people. And I am, I'm sorry that we weren't able to provide as much as is needed right now. I do know that these are really hard times for a lot of people and our people. And I just want to say that we're doing the best we can, and hopefully you will see that through future dividends. We did provide $1 million worth of aid to many charities that serve our people. Now I'm not sure what's going to happen with the CARES Act, but perhaps we will be able to do something in the future related to the CARES funding if it ever comes through to ANCSA corporations. Okay, on to the last one. I know we're getting down to the wire here. Number 7, I'm going to paraphrase this. It says, why don't we get help for burial and not just $150? We all know the cost of burial and it's high. Sealaska passed the memorial fund, the Deshu Memorial Fund, at least a couple of years ago, and my recollection is that the amount that is paid per shareholder or per shareholder passing, I should say, the minimum is $250, and I believe it's based on number of shares, and then it goes up to 500, and then 750, and then 1,000, I believe, if I'm not correct. Okay, so I know it's never enough when it comes to burial and losing a loved one, and all the travel and whatnot that has to go on, but I am very proud that we were able to give more now than we did, well, actually we didn't give anything not too long ago. So I'm very proud that we're able to provide some relief. And that will wrap up our Q&A. I want to thank you all for your questions. They're really good questions. I really appreciate that we're able to have this forum to answer them. And we didn't pick the easiest ones. There were easier ones for sure. But, in keeping with trying to be as open and transparent as possible with our shareholders, if you ever have any other questions, feel free to call on us and ask us. I always encourage shareholders to call me personally if they have questions, and if I can't answer, I'll try to get them the answer.